Righteousness has always been on the mind of our Father in heaven.
Now, if you mark in your Bibles, underline that.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the If You Mark in Your Bible podcast. My name is Josh, your host, and today we're looking at Proverbs chapter 13, verses 1 through 6. The title of our episode today is Righteousness Hates Falsehood. Looking at it with us today is Matt McBrayer. Matt is the preacher at the Church of Christ that meets at Whispering Hills. He's married to Autumn, formerly Kidwell, and has 6 children. So, Matt, I appreciate you coming on, man. Excited to have you on.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a little while.
I appreciate it, and I know you'll do a good job for sure. Just to give a brief context of where we're at as far as Proverbs 13, verses 1 through 6. We mentioned it last episode when we delve into Proverbs, but we'll just restate it briefly here. Chapters 1 through 9 has just a theme that runs through it where Solomon is pushing his reader towards wisdom and encouraging them to avoid folly, shows the value and the worth and the beauty of wisdom and then the deceitful dark nature of folly. And then when we come into chapter 10 and essentially mainly through the rest of the book, you have essentially just small proverbs that really just almost like fatherly advice. You know, we grow up, our fathers give us just little nuggets of advice as we grow up, and that essentially accumulates to wisdom that we have, fatherly wisdom that we kind of take into our lives and pass on to our own children. And so that's essentially what Solomon's doing in this. He's just giving these little bits and nuggets of wisdom for us to digest and apply. We made the point last episode that most of these are what are known as antithetical parallelisms. So it shows what happens with wisdom, and then it shows what happens with folly, and it's essentially show the absoluteness of the statements. Nothing that folly experiences is experienced by the wise, and nothing that the wise experience is essentially experienced by those who are foolish. What else do you have for context?
Yeah, so I guess going back to what you said about the advice from a father, namely you see father to son, and there's a lot of instruction there. And so, but, you know, when you think about that, it's been said that children get a sense of the world from their fathers. You know, their father's the one that teach them about those things.
Right.
And so when you think about that and then look at the book of Proverbs, there's just multiple times throughout the book where it says, you know, this is not forsaking the instruction of your father, or, you know, and it talks about the mother too, but a lot of this is just about the father to the son. And right. I think that is kind of neat, especially being a father who has sons. You know, it's interesting to you know, the kind of bond that you have, and you want to, you know, rear them right. I mean, they're going to be the leaders of their houses, and you want to make sure that they're, you know, spiritually mature and all those things. And so they've got to be wise. And, well, how do you do that? We've got to impart wisdom unto them.
Excellent point. So without further ado, let's pull up the text. I'd like to remind everyone that our text is powered by the Scattered Abroad Network, where you can catch this podcast and many others like it. I would also encourage everyone to download the app wherever you get your apps from. That's a resource that is well worth it. I know I personally enjoy listening to a lot of the sermons that they've archived in that, and hopefully that continues to grow as well. All right, so verse 1, it says, "A wise son hears his father's instruction, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke." What do you have there, bud?
Well, in all of these verses that we're going to cover today, I've because they're the antithetical parallelisms, I've basically got the something versus something else, because it just kind of breaks down the passage. Well, right here, I have just an introductory remark of wisdom versus foolishness. You've got the wise son. He's going to hear the father's instructions. You know, it's not enough just to, you know, hear it as in just acknowledging that it's there, but this is the obedience to that. And it's, there's a difference between hearing and then really hearing something. You know, I have made this example many times that, you know, I'm a big football guy. I like football. If my wife comes in and asks me to do something while I'm watching a football game, I might have heard her, but I didn't really hear her. And so she might have to get my attention a little bit more. But, this hearing here is something that needs to be obeyed. You need to hear, a wise son is going to hear the instruction of his father. He's going to listen to it. He's going to follow it. He's going to do it. While the opposite of this is true as well. The opposite is that the scoffer heareth not the rebuke. So, like, he's not going to, the same, person should be listening, but maybe someone doesn't listen and they're not hearing the rebuke. There are times where you see people like this in society, that they get in trouble once and they get in trouble again and they get in trouble again. And it's like, can you just stop? Can you just stop breaking the law? Can you stop, and they just don't, for some reason, they just don't listen to wisdom. They just throw that away and just continue down that path. So the father's instructing here and saying, the wise son's going to listen. Well, he's going to listen to his father. Now, there are several times when this is brought up in the Proverbs alone. You could go. I've got a couple written down in the margin of my Bible, but Proverbs 4 verses 1 through 14 talks about this. Chapter 10 verse 1, 15 and verse 5, 15 verse 20, and really that's not exhaustive. That's just a few references to this idea of wisdom and listening to the instruction of a father in various ways, because this is, like I said, this is a common theme repeated. Again, if you're a father to a son, what are you going to want to do? Yeah, you're going to want to repeat this information, because do we get everything the first time? Well, no, we don't. And so I know that there's been several times that, in the past where, my parents had to correct me more than once on an issue. And so, this is the same thought process. Hey, listen to me. This is wisdom here. And so the father is going to instruct in wisdom, and in the Proverbs just continually go over this and say, hey, a wise son is going to listen to his father.
Excellent point. That word hears, I've underlined it and put the word accepts, because that's the thought of it. And it's like hearing versus like your wife, for example. You may have heard the words, but there's that this word in the Hebrew is that actually hearing them and then accepting what is said and doing it, and so forth. And then instruction here has the thought of discipline, rebuke, and reproof involved with it as well. So essentially what Solomon's saying from a Hebrew perspective is a wise son allows himself to be disciplined. And I know it's a little awkward in the English, but essentially what it is the son understands that the discipline, the reproof, or even in some cases the rebuke, is meant to shape him positively. And so some of the passages I put, Hebrews 12 verses 3 through 11, when it talks about God disciplining us. And I love verse 10, how essentially that passage almost closes from the standpoint of God disciplines us the way a father disciplines his son, so that we might share in his holiness. And the thought there is that God allows trials to fall on us so that we rely more on him and we grow our relationship with him. That's a humbling thought to understand. When you look at trials and look at it from the standpoint of God has allowed this to fall on me so that I grow closer to him, so that my relationship with him grows, then you start to look at your trials a little bit differently when that's behind it. Revelation 3:19, Jesus made that point to the ones that I love, I rebuke and chasten. Psalm 94:12, 1:18, Jeremiah 30 verse 11. Obviously as fathers understand that disciplining children is not the easiest thing to do. Yet I know as a father myself, appreciate the discipline I receive, and then I may not have appreciated it. But obviously, but now standing on the other end, I understand the benefits of it and do have a greater appreciation for it. The word scoffer here, you can put Psalm 1 verse 1, sitteth in the seat of the scoffer, and the thought there is one who shows contempt for wisdom. And to me, this is the worst kind of fool. in the standpoint that, or from the standpoint that this is an arrogant individual without any reason to be arrogant. If that makes sense. When you scoff at wisdom, when you deny wisdom, you obviously don't have it, and so there's an arrogance there that's unwarranted, for sure. You have anything else before we move on?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, on the whole idea of, I use the American Standard Version, and the idea of scoffer and mocker,
Right.
are they're similar, but you think about that mocker making fun of,
Yep.
the wisdom, instead of accepting it and learning from it, they're just making fun of it, and that's it's hard to see when you really do see that, but there's a lot of good things that you point out. I thought about that in Psalm 1 as well, and then that instruction aspect that you brought up, I think is an excellent point, because I tell my kids sometimes that I don't want them to make big mistakes that are life-ruining mistakes. But make a mistake here and there is good, especially when you're talking about, I'm not talking necessarily spiritually minded things, but I'm just saying in general, if I mess something up, guess what I learned from that?
Right.
I learned not to do that,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
so, sometimes I tell my kids, it's okay to make mistakes, because you get to learn from those mistakes. Now, when we're talking about spiritual things, we want to aim for no mistakes.
Right.
But when we do make those, we need to go, okay, all right, take a step back. What did I do wrong here? But that's what your parents' instruction is for, is to try to help you to not, enter into those mistakes. So,
Great
I thought
point.
that was a good point.
Great point. Verse 2, it says, "From the fruit of his mouth a man eats what is good, but the desire of the treacherous is for violence. Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life, and he who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied." What do you have there?
All right. So, in verse 2, I've got this honesty versus dishonesty. The man shall eat good by the fruit of his mouth. You're going to, by what you say, it's going to bind what you're doing. So if you're an honest person, then people are going to be able to deal with you honestly. And then, if you're a dishonest person, obviously, that's what the idea of this, the treacherous here. What did your version have? I can't remember what it said.
Whoever guards his mouth, treacherous is for violence.
Yeah, the treacherous there is the deceiver, the deceitful, And so, you think about that, and you kind of think of that, like when with that verse, that thought there of the treacherous, like that sleazy car salesman guy, oh yeah, this car's great, and I don't know, I guess people don't do it as much as they used to, but I remember, when I was a kid, hearing about, people putting sawdust in engines to make them not knock and stuff like that, just weird stuff, and rolling back miles on vehicles and things like that, just so that, oh, look at this vehicle. Now we have better ways of dealing with that, I know, but this idea of someone that is really just mischievous, that they are trying to deceive. But, the man shall eat good by the fruit of his mouth. I think in Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 and 8, basically that idea of you're going to reap what you sow, and that's kind of this Old Testament version of that.
Yeah.
You're going to reap what you sow. If you're going to do good things, you're going to get back good things. If you are doing bad things, well, you're definitely going to reap bad things. There's several other passages that you could go into talking about, different versions of this,
Right.
You live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword, and things like that. But this idea of just honesty versus dishonesty, and words have consequences, and we need to understand that.
That's a great point.
I think that people think that they can just say whatever they want, especially, when you're behind a screen and a keyboard. You say whatever you want. There's no consequences to that.
Right.
But words have consequences, and we're going to build reputations based on our words. We're going to find opportunities or lose opportunities based on our words. And so, it's absolutely imperative for us to be honest.
Right. No, that's a great point. In fact, in verse 2, that word desire has the thought of inner craving or heart. And I put this next to it. I always try and put, if I can, if it's applicable, just essentially notes to myself, questions or statements that to reflect. And so next to desire, that's that inner craving. And I just put, are my words feeding life or are my words feeding conflict? And that's that's that word violence there at the end of verse 3, or 2 rather. That's the thought. What are my words doing? You made that point. I appreciate you pulling up the keyboard. Just because it's not actually coming out of our mouth doesn't mean we're not saying it when we're typing it. And really, what we should be doing, if I'm speaking, it should be imparting wisdom. It should be imparting advice. It should be imparting exhortation. I mean, in Ephesians chapter 4, speech that builds up. It shouldn't be tearing down. Gossip, lies, hate, backbiting, those are things that bring people down, cause division and all that. So definitely the tongue, we talked about it in other episodes. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, in more episodes. But it's such James makes it in verse 3, but it's such a vital part of, how many, just look at just across society in general, how many things would be avoided if someone would just not say what they want to say?
Yeah.
Or type what they want to type. And you could even bring that down, to a more specific, the church. Mm-hmm. How many times would the church have not faced some sort of conflict if people would just learn to bite their tongue and so forth? So you make an excellent point there. Verse 3, guards his mouth, preserves his life. He opens wide his lip, comes to ruin. And it's that thought of just not thinking before you speak. There's a proverb, amenope, Amenemope, that essentially says sleep at night before speaking. I don't know if the old business technique or hack where you write an email and save it and go home. You write it at the end of the day. If it's an angry email, write it at the end of the day, save it and go home, sleep on it, and then when you come in the morning, if you're still willing to send it, then maybe, but 99% of the time what happens, you go home, you sleep on it, you come back the next day, you're like, yeah, I probably shouldn't send that, delete the email. So that's good advice, and that's the thought here. What else you have?
Well, I was kind of thinking about this in a general regard when it comes to knowledge, not letting things slip versus guarding your mouth. Sometimes we have information that doesn't need to be spread.
Right.
And we don't need to have loose lips. I think that that's a big part of this. There's, you already referenced James 3. But there's a lot of references about the tongue and how to tame the tongue and how we should speaking to one another, speaking to those that are outside. I was kind of thinking about this when we're going over verse 2, talking about, what you are, what kind of words you're, the feelings that behind the words and what you're feeding, and what's feeding you. And of course, we have reference in Matthew to out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. But when you think about that old Indian proverb where you got two wolves inside of you, and you're feeding them. You've got one that's good, one that's bad, and the one that you feed the most is the one that's going to win. Mm-hmm. That's that same thought process really through all of this. Is that we've got to make sure that the words that we're speaking they're coming out of our heart. And we got to make sure that they're good. And I think about this in regards to our personal relationships. I don't know how many times, and I feel really bad about this. But I know that other people have gone through it. I know I'm not the only one. But I feel bad about the fact that sometimes I can treat strangers better than my own family in this regard. Mm-hmm. How that is. You are talking to somebody and you're like, well, I better guard my tongue. But then you come home and maybe you're talking to your children or you're talking to your wife and you say something that really you shouldn't have.
Right.
and you're not guarding your mouth well enough. You know before it comes out that it's going to hurt, and you didn't think of a wiser way to say it. Even if it needed to be said, you didn't think of a wiser way to say it. You just kind of bluntly put it out there. Those are things that we have to keep in mind when reading stuff like this. Is that there's some really good application to this stuff for our personal lives, and I think about that with this one. This basically what's going to happen is if you guard your mouth, then you're going to keep yourself from various sins of the tongue.
Right.
And that's the purpose of this is, think about your words. Sometimes I think this happens more with boys than anything. But, I remember as a kid, my parents would always say, yeah, you didn't really think about that before you did it, did you?
Yeah.
Or you didn't think about that before you said it, And so I've found myself going up to my boys in particular and going, hey, what were you thinking when you did that?
Mm-hmm.
And then going, yeah, you probably weren't thinking, were you? You think about these verses, though, the more that you have control of, your mouth, the words that are coming out of your mouth, then the better off you're going to be. And I know that really starts with the heart.
Right.
Again, it starts with the heart, but.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Verse 5 says, the righteous hates falsehood, but the wicked brings shame and disgrace. Righteousness guards him whose way is blameless, but sin overthrows the wicked. What do you have there, Bo?
Yeah, so when I'm looking at these passages, matter of fact, there's a quote that I think fits right in here, and we kind of skipped over verse 4 there. I think it goes with both of these.
Yeah.
The soul of the sluggard desireth and hath nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made fat. And then when you go to verse 5, a righteous man hateth lying, but a wicked man is loathsome and cometh to shame. There is a pretty famous quote, and I'm probably going to botch it just a little bit because it's just off the top of my head. Benjamin Franklin was quoted on poverty as saying, if you'd like to get someone out of poverty, basically the idea is you make them uncomfortable with it.
Right.
And so, of course, in society, we have a whole lot of things that we want to help people with. You got welfare, you got Medicare, you got all these different things. We want to help people. Some people will take the system and abuse it. And so when it comes to being a sluggard, you're lazy. You're lazy. You're a lazy person. Well, they're going to be in desire, while the person that is diligent, he's working, he's going to have abundance. Now, when you go to verse 5, you can take that same thought process, and this is what I love about that quote from Benjamin Franklin, is when you think about that in a spiritual sense, well, how do you get a person out of sin? You make them uncomfortable with it.
Right.
And so, and again, what do we do in the church? In society, we have all these different programs to help people that are down and out, and then people abuse them. Well, in the church, what do? Oh, well, you've sinned. Oh, that's not good. Maybe somebody should talk to them about that.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to talk to them about that, but somebody should, And we just kind of skirt around it instead of doing what we see like 1 Corinthians 5 and things like that. But yeah, we need to be uncomfortable with sin. In particular, in verse 5, you've got the righteous versus the wicked. The righteous man, he hates lying. He hates it.
Yeah.
Why would a righteous man hate lying? Well, it's just, he's supposed to be, a righteous man is trying to be like God. Well, God doesn't lie. This is completely against his character. Well, someone who's a follower of God, it's really supposed to be against their character too.
Right.
And so that's why he hates it. But also, I think anybody just hates it just because, well, who do you trust if everybody's lying to you?
Right.
Who do you trust? Well, it's kind of like right now, there's a lot of AI videos out there and stuff. And so some of them you can quite clearly tell that they're
Right.
AI, and it's getting better and better and better. One of these days, we're not going to be able to tell, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's just made up. It's a lie, We're being deceived by some of that stuff. But you think about the wicked, they're going to come to shame. They are going to their thought is leading to destruction.
Right. No, that's a great point. And speaking of antithesis, and you touched on a good point, how it seems like, we're more willing to open our mouths when it comes to negative. And we're not, I guess the best way to say it is we're not uncomfortable with sin, but we're uncomfortable with righteousness or godliness.
Yeah.
Just how quick are we to open our mouths to talk bad about someone or to say something negative about someone, but then the opportunity to evangelize, the opportunity to spread the gospel, the opportunity to encourage somebody comes up, and then that's when we want to guard ourselves. I think that's something that we have to obviously guard against, and that's obviously where wisdom comes in. But you look at verse 5, that word shame is literally a stench, a foul odor to self and those affected. And you think of a foul odor, say, for example, you were to get something, not you, but just an individual get sprayed by a skunk. That odor, it's not only repulsive to the person who was sprayed, but it's also repulsive to the ones around them smell as well. And that's the thought here. This hates falsehood. It's brings shame. It brings this stench. Lies, deceit, falsehood doesn't affect just the individual whose lies, or even the one who is lied about, but the one to whom the lie is spoken. It forms opinions about people that are deceitful and that aren't founded on what they should be. Hate here is more than just an emotion. The righteous is actively against falsehood, and I think you bring up a great point. Why should we be actively against it? Because it's a misrepresentation of something. It may be a misrepresentation of another individual. It might be a misrepresentation of God. One who claims to be of God but lies, misrepresents God, and makes essentially those who are trying to live righteously, for lack of a better term, their job harder, because it puts a negative tint, I guess, to the church that has to be dealt with and all that. So there's a sense where it's not just, we can't sit idly by and just be like, well, let it go. There's a sense where it has to be dealt with. I mean, there has to be an active pursuit against it. And then verse 6 is, righteousness guards him whose way is blameless. I took whoever guards in verse 3, righteousness guards in verse 6, drew a line, put James 3 in verse 6, where it talks about the tongue stains the whole body. Mm-hmm. And I think you touched on that as well, where essentially our mouth kind of dictates everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And like you mentioned, really the mouth is an indicator of what's inside.
Mm-hmm.
You have anything else before we close?
Yeah, so in verse 6, I have security of the righteous versus, you got protection really versus destruction. You got security from the righteous, and then you got destruction from the wicked.
Right.
That's what a righteous person wants to do. They want to keep somebody from sin, but the wicked, they don't care. They like watching people go into sin. Right. They're fine with that. It's good entertainment.
Yeah.
I basically have that the righteous, they're going to guard the upright. They're trying to help people stay saved. But the wicked, they want to bring them down. They want to bring them down to shame.
Yeah, a lot of motives behind that as well. Excellent explanation. That's a great way to close it, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
I've
enjoyed it. To those watching, thank you so much for your support. Until next time, keep studying.
Mark in your Bibles, underline that.